Le Notti di Cabiria, 188A, quarta. Silenzio! Azione!
A Sornazzari, ma io c'ho casa mia, sa, con l'acqua, la luce, il pibigas, non mi manca niente, proprio tutte le comodità, c'ho perfino il termometro. Questa qui, sotto l'archi, non ci ha mai dormito. Ma una volta, o due.
Ragazzi, qui si smonta tutto, il film non si fa più. Quei giorni qua non ci deve essere più niente, bisogna cominciare subito. Coraggio, al lavoro, buttate giù. Dico bene, autore?
Sì, grazie. Arrivederci, ragazzi. Ci vediamo in un prossimo film.
Lo speriamo.
Ciao, marinai.
Welcome to Cinema Italia, a podcast dedicated to the world of Italian cinema. Presented by me, John Bleasdale. Everybody, and welcome to Cinema Italia. My name's John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and I'm joined today by David Rooney, the chief film critic of Hollywood Reporter. And today we're going to be talking about Nights of Cabiria, Federico Fellini's masterpiece. I mean, it's difficult, actually, David. I say Federico Fellini's masterpiece, but I mean, there are so many that it's almost as if Federico Fellini's masterpiece is just like saying a Fellini film.
Well, yeah, I would agree, but there is definitely some I like a lot more than others, and Cabiria is absolutely my favorite. You know, every time we wrestle every 10 years with what to put in that Sight and Sound poll of the best films of the world, things come and go for me, but Cabiria is always there. I adore that film, and I have to say, yeah, probably I'm in the minority of liking the early Felini, where he still had one foot very firmly in neorealism, to the later Felini when he kind of discovered his showmanship and his extravaganza, sort of phantasmagoria kind of Fellini-esque personality really emerged. But I like seeing the roots of it in the early films as well. So I would say my favorites are probably Vitelloni, La Strada, and Cabiria, which are all from the early period, the pre-Dolce Vita Fellini.
Yeah, I mean, Lo Cieco Bianco, the white shake, as well, as one that I would maybe add to that list as a...
Fantastic. And Alberto Sordi, you know, an actor who kind of too often was just relegated to playing sticky comedy. It's just so great in that.
Do you remember when you first saw this film?
I came to it in a roundabout kind of way, a very gay boy kind of way. I came to it via Sweet Charity.
Shirley MacLaine's musical comedy version.
Yes, I didn't see it, Sweet Charity, on the stage until much later. So this was the Bob Fosse film version, which he famously had trouble with. You know, he tangled with the studios. He was not happy with the way it came out. I get the feeling, even though I think it was never public, that he and Shirley MacLaine did not get on. And he really tussled about the ending. He wanted the ending to be true to the stage show, which is actually true to the film, to Cabiria, very downbeat, but very with this element of hope to it. And the studios, he just anticipated that they would want a happy ending. So he shot a happy ending that he was not happy with. And to his great surprise, the studio said, no, you're right, the sad ending is better. So he did get the ending he wanted, but I think he was not happy with the film. And all of that experience, I think, taught him to be tougher and to demand stronger terms when he then went back to do Cabaret and really did sort of find his mojo as Bob Fosse on screen. But so I saw Sweet Charity. I loved the story and I was curious about it. And I think I just went through a sort of a binge period of finding all these Fellini screenings at little repertory houses in Sydney, Australia. And Cabiria was one that just blew me away. It was so emotional. First of all, so funny. The film is hilarious.
Absolutely.
And then it just takes this turn and the pathos is enormous. And of course, there's wild melodrama there, but it's always deadly, deadly serious. And I think so few filmmakers have being able to capture that balance. You know, for me, one of them is Almodovar, who can be absolutely hilarious and have this extreme pathos that rips your heart out at the same time. And I think that Fellini really kind of struck that note, both in Cabiria and in other films like La Strada. You know, I think the combo of Fellini and Giulietta Masina, his wife and his muse, in so many films was just unbeatable. And this film in particular, I have to say, I love the combination, you know, the spectacle and squalor, the sacred and the profane, the dreams and the magic, and then the sort of purity and innocence of that naive earlier time, the cruelty of reality, all these things that come together so beautifully in it. So, you know, I probably saw it, I guess, I'm thinking, you know, very late 70s, maybe 78, 79 at a rep house in Sydney. And then I saw it again much, much later when I had moved to Italy. I was back and forth from Rome when I was living in London in the 80s and had a probably completely ill-advised Italian partner at the time. And while that was sort of evolving, I was back and forth from Rome. And then I eventually moved to Rome in 89 and was there through the end of 2002. So I saw it at least once then, and it meant something completely different because, you know, as I got to know Rome, those the aspects of Rome that are in there very much thanks to Pasolini's involvement in the screenplay, you know, that sort of the Romanaccio dialogue, which is just fantastic. And of course, I heard that all the time because it never changes. Rome is always that city underneath its sophisticated veneer. And I sort of related to it in a different way. It's weird. It's a film that no matter how many times I see it, I am always surprised by the wallop of it at the end. You know, I always get caught up in it, feel so much for Cabiria. You know, it pulls you in. Masina is just a genius in that film at pulling you in with her her comedy, you know, her clown aspect, her Chaplin-esque walk, the little waddle, the amazing costumes by what was his name? Piero Gherardi, who did the designs, the production design and the costumes. You know, the way he puts her in this little chicken feather bolero, and
I was going to mention that. That's perfect. That bolero,
it's amazing. That bolero,
and the sandals with socks.
The sandals with socks is incredible. The hourglass skirt that is so the black skirt with the little fringe on the bottom, the frill on the bottom, and then my favorite bit is the rain hat with the hole in the back for the ponytail to come out. You know, it is just not what you expect a sex worker to look like, and I think there's so much of that stuff that is so great in the film. But she pulls you in, you know, she makes you invest so much in the character, and then you feel this awful anxiety creeping up when, you know, the past repeats itself, and she is, well, I'm not going to spoil the ending for anyone who hasn't seen it, but I mean, the ending is devastating and yet beautiful. The final shot of this movie is one of my favorite shots in any movie. It really is just a killer.
It breaks your heart and yet somehow manages to elevate you as well and make you feel things are going to be okay somehow, even though how is unclear. I mean, just to give a basic sort of précis of the plot, Cabiria is a sort of nome d'arte of a sex worker who, in the words of, as you say, the Pasolini-esque dialogue, lives the life. She's described. We see her at the very beginning.
As one of the urchins in the beginning that saves her from drowning says, "È una che fa la vita." You know, she's one who lives the life, which was a euphemism back then for being a working girl.
Absolutely, and the euphemisms here are wafer thin because this is really an explicit film in terms of what's going on. There's nothing.
Amazingly so for 1957, right? I mean, no one was making a film about Roman sex workers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, I mean, must have been so refreshing I'm thinking also of like English language audiences, must have been so refreshing to sort of get these films and just like, wow, they're just so punchy and real and on the, you know, yeah, there's all this showy aspect and there's this, but even right at the very beginning, you see her basically being dumped by her boyfriend, but like literally dumped, pushed in a river so he can steal her money. And you get her there's a line about, oh, wait, get her before she hits the sewer, the fognatura.
Yes.
It's just like, it's just so
I love those kids. Those kids, that seem to live in nothing but shorts or swim trunks, and they're skinny as rakes. They're climbing up the scaffolding. All of those things felt very Pasolinian to me. And I think all that stuff is so beautifully observed. Everything around that. I think it's Acilia is the area maybe between Rome and Ostia where they shot. So sort of halfway between the city and the beach, the beach kind of satellite city. It's such poverty there, such humble kind of means they're living by. I mean, Cabiria's cinder block house is practically a bunker. It's such an unaccommodating sort of weird brutalist structure. And when she sells the house late in the film, she sells it to people even poorer than her. That looks like they're on their truck loaded up with everything they own, and they look like they've stepped out of the grapes of wrath. I mean, the other thing that really strikes me every time I see this film and that I forget is just the explicitness of its examination of the giant wealth divide. You've got all the toffs of Via Veneto and all the, even the high-class prostitutes that are working Via Veneto are a world apart from the women doing at the Passeggiata Archeologica, the Baths of Caracalla, where Cabiria and all her cohorts are working. They're just a different breed altogether. And, I mean, the difference between that and the poverty of, her talking about some of the girls who live under the arches at Caracalla, and she's very proud of having her own house with utilities. She has water and electricity, which obviously was not a given for people living in that part of Rome at that time, which is weird because 1957 was the economic boom was in full swing in Italy, but it's so far away from these characters, so distant from them, and nowhere more so in the scenes that I always forget, where the Good Samaritan that she meets on the road home one night with his big bag of blankets and food and things. He's going around feeding people who live in the grottos. They live in the caves underground. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but was that sequence not originally cut by the censors and then restored later? Exactly. It was censored after the original showing. So it was shown once, but then thereafter it was censored until the 80s or the 90s. I think it was... Because I know when it was released in America and other countries, it was released, I think, without that sequence. And it's such a beautiful moment because you also see what happens to the sex worker in the character Bomba, who is slightly mad, living in a grotto, thrilled that the Good Samaritan has come by to give her some food or whatever, and immediately goes into this kind of reverie of boasting about, I once had an apartment in Rome and another one in Ostia. Men would give me furs and jewels, and I had money and things. And Cabiria says, she's not wrong. I know her. She's telling the truth. She was beautiful. She was sought after. And, now she is this kind of woman who is really falling apart physically, mentally. And, I found all that stuff heartbreaking. I also think it's just great that the guy playing the Good Samaritan is Fellini's editor on Cabiria, La Strada, La Dolce Vita, and 8½. Oh, I didn't know that. Good knowledge. Yeah. I did not know that. That's interesting. Leo Catozzo. Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. Great bit of casting. Yeah, because he's so convincing. He's so... I actually was thinking, he must be sort of a volunteer from the area, and they've just used him because he's such a gentle voice and so non-judgmental of Cabiria and the people he helps. Yeah, Fellini kind of was used to working with him, and he always talked about how collegial the atmosphere was on his shoots and post-production, all of that. He even sort of used words like festoso, festive. And he, I think, like to maintain a very friendly working atmosphere. Flaiano and Pinelli, his regular script collaborators, always talked about it as well. But I think was not always the case with every Italian director. So, maybe just got chummy with this editor, loved the sound of his voice, and somehow identified him. I mean, every time I hear an interview where Fellini talked about his casting process, it's always so fascinating that he would write the character a certain way and then, start to see people coming in for auditions and just see a face that was nothing like the one he had written, or a body type that was nothing like the one he had written, and think, no, wait, I can imagine this person in that role. So would completely rethink it on the fly. Just great stuff.
And I love that cave scene that you talked about as well, because of the it reminded me of Roberto Rossellini's Paisan. There's a similar scene of absolute poverty in Napoli with a black GI. But as you say, this is 1950. 10 years have passed, and you would think that things had changed. I mean, the economic boom is, those divisions exist, and the economic boom is to some extent touching because like one of the prostitutes has her own Fiat, and they're all shouting about.
And wait, 1957 was the year the Fiat 500 came out. I think it is a Fiat 500.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely, it is. Yeah,
very cool. I mean, I have to say, it was very cool to see the new version of the Fiat 500 in the new Mission Impossible film. I just, those cars are such a part of Italy, and I love that a version of them still exists. There's these weird little matchbox cars on. They're like toys. And of course, Italy is still world famous, worst country in the world for parking. So a tiny little toy car is the best thing you can have.
Absolutely. And I love the way she gets in the car. The working girl who's I think maybe one of the only ones who's actually got a pimp. There's a pimp who's trying to recruit Cabiria.
Called Hamleto.
That's so good, isn't it? That's so good. Yeah. I love it when they all go to church and the guy turns around
and he takes his uncle who they, the women are the working girls are all kind of scoffing at the idea of the uncle getting any kind of redemption it's the sanctuary of Our Lady of Divine Love, right? Divino Amore. And they're all I love that they very rudely, in a way you would never get around with to now, call him Erzoppo, the cripple. But it's so politically incorrect now. But I don't think he has a name. But the uncle who they scoff at the idea of this person who made his money selling cocaine and pimping women, it could possibly be sort of touched by the grace of Mary, of the Madonna. And that scene is so great. It's so Fellini too, that, you've got this high religiosity of people going, hoping for a cure to this shrine. And at the same time, it's pure spectacle, from the lights in the church. There's a sort of a light that looks like it should be at a music hall, at a variety show, that is sort of Viva la Madonna or Viva la Maria or something in lights. And it's just so theatrical and kitschy and fantastic and pure Fellini. I just think he was trying out ideas here while, as I said before, like keeping a foot in neorealism, and all that stuff with Grotto, with the cave dwellers, is pure neorealism. It's so linked to what Rossellini and other filmmakers were doing back then. And yet there are little touches of Fellini, like the La Bomba, the former prostitute who is living underground, her extravagance, the glory that she sort of still draws from her past is so Fellini as well. I mean, I love the way it sort of crosses all those boundaries, this film.
And she's kind of like a warning to Cabiria. She's like a future Cabiria, and also a key maybe to Cabiria's own character, that there's this sort of self-protecting exuberance to her and a certain lack of self-awareness that you just need to defend yourself in that situation. She can't throughout the film, she doesn't, you admire her for not reacting to how people are treating her, and then every now and again she just gets it. She suddenly sees someone's face when she's dancing in the nightclub with the famous actor, and she's enjoying herself.
Nightclub.
Oh, Mambo!
And when she just first of all, she's sort of somewhat decorous with the dance, and then she's just like, what the fuck? Sorry, can I swear on this?
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
She's just like into it and doing her mambo, and Amedeo Nazzari, who I love that he's playing, such a disguised version of himself, the Italian Errol Flynn playing Alberto Lazzari. It was like, it could not be closer to his own name.
The Spoonerism, practically.
practically asleep on the dance floor while she just goes into crazy mode. And who cares about the withering looks she's getting from everybody else in the club, the staff and the other patrons? I mean, she just rises above it. I mean, I have to say, I love the belligerence and the feistiness of this character. I love that she is so free-spirited and so able to find joy and just, on the street dancing, doing her little dance steps randomly. She everything about her physicality just gives me Charlie Chaplin. But I think that, she does have her defense. She does have that sort of way of not acknowledging, but I think it's when her mask comes down and she does reveal the yearning that's underneath all that the film is at its most poignant. And that happens, of course, in the sanctuary scene where she is, she turns up like she's along for the ride with Amleto and his uncle on crutches and the other women. And she's really just along for the ride. She's sort of shrugging at it. You get this feeling she's kind of left aside her Catholic upbringing. And yet when she's very respectful, she puts the scarf over her head on the way into the church. She takes a candle. And by the time she lights that candle, she's asked Wanda, the fabulous Wanda, who I would love to talk about some more, but she's asked her, how does the act of contrition go again? She's forgotten all of that past. And it all comes back when she lights the candle. And suddenly she is this desperate woman in tears pleading to the Madonna, you helped me to change my life. I mean, I find that scene just completely heartbreaking. And those moments where she reveals the self that she's hiding underneath this belligerent warmongering facade where she's ready to pick a fight with anyone is just heartbreaking. I do also love the other woman that she fights with, the other version of a bomba who is sort of on the way there, the mad woman with this sort of Louise Brooks, the Pandora kind of ball.
The Grand Dame, as she self-identifies.
Yes, io sono la Gran Dama. I love her constant abuse that she's hurling at the other women.
Arrest them all! The cops turn. I'm not running. Arrest them all!
Fantastic. That stuff is just hilarious. And, of course, it takes somebody like Fellini to find the hilarity in something like that. He really does manage to give you this sort of the sublime and the squalor of it all in one hit.
And yet he's never laughing at them. There's never a sense of like, this is a parade of grotesques that we are looking down on. You always feel like, I wouldn't mind spending some time with these people. They're kind of fun. They're kind of, there's misery and all the rest of it, but they're complicated people. There's more than one side to them.
Yes. Yeah. I think that it's interesting that even though Cabiria is constantly rebuffing the friendship of Wanda, that is the only pure relationship in her life, that friendship that endures no matter how badly she treats her, how many times she loses her temper with her, how frequently she dismisses every very, very keen and incisive observation that Wanda usually makes, that friendship endures. And I find their parting at the end of the film very, very moving. And that actress who I did not know from other films, Franca Marzi, I think her name is. It was interesting. I saw an interview that, again, Piero Gherardi, the designer, talked about how she was actually quite slender compared to how she appears in the film. She's this statuesque, solid woman who just physically, when she's walking along next to teeny tiny little Giulietta Masina, their physicality together is hilarious, just the sight of them. But he talked about padding out her ass. She has a big padded bum and padded breasts, and he used some kind of bra filled with water. This is way before the water bra or the Wonder bra or any of those inventions came along. And every morning on the shoot, they had to refill the bra with water and make sure there were no leaks and things so that Wanda could have this fantastic physical presence. And I love that she's so elegant. Even when she's wandering around the town, she's in these kind of long beaded dresses and the heels and things. She's walking on these unpaved gravel roads in heels. And you just think, yeah, she is, she's absolute class.
Yeah, exactly. There's a concept that I always come back to. I think it's a really useful critical idea, the idea of romantic irony, where you can laugh at something, but also the thing that you're laughing at survives.
Yes.
Mozart's love operettas. Everybody's mixed up and is singing to the wrong people, and they singing to people they don't think they're in love with, but they're actually in love with, and husbands singing to their adulterous lovers who turn out to be their wives in disguise. And yet the love survives. And I found myself thinking about romantic irony as I rewatched this movie and thought, yeah, the as you said, there's the friendship is tried and tried and tried, but it's real and it's there. These people have real struggles and you're laughing at them, but there's resilience and there's survival.
I think resilience is the key word, particularly about Cabiria. I mean, the resilience is there in that final shot, which, okay, let's spoil it. It's a film from 1957. If you haven't seen it by this point, so she has lost everything in the cruelest, most humiliating, devastating way possible. She's begged this person who's betrayed her to kill her, to toss her off the cliff, which was obviously his original intention before he had a crisis of conscience and got nervous.
But still took the money.
Yeah, still took the money. It took everything she had, and she's left with nothing at the end. But she falls in with this group of revelers, this young crowd partying, dancing, singing along the street. And a young woman who could be her at a younger age says, buonasera or whatever. And the Nino Rota music, which has been absent for such a long stretch of the film, comes back via the musicians playing on the street. And you get Cabiria just sort of wandering in a daze in the middle of these revelers, and with her eyeliner, which has run into a perfect black tear on her face. It looks like a tattoo of a tear. And the way she allows their joy to infect her in that final scene is to me so beautiful. It allows her some hope. It allows her some sense of life going on. You get the feeling this woman is not defeated. She will never be completely defeated. She will always have these reserves to draw on. She has this innocence, which is invulnerable, as jaded as she becomes, as many times as she is abused, disappointed, betrayed, that innocence survives. And I do think, people said often about Fellini that he loved all of his characters, even the reprobates, even the complete contemptible people. He loved all of them equally. And I think that's nowhere more so than the characters he wrote for Giulietta Masina, and the two, if you talk about the early ones, Gelsomina in La Strada and Cabiria are kind of sisters in a way, except that Gelsomina's purity and innocence are right there on the surface. Cabiria hides hers underneath the shield, this jaded, angry, well, not angry maybe, but belligerent. She's feisty. She's pugnacious, and that I think becomes her protection.
And I think that tear as well is, I think it's a theme that runs through the film of her also being a performer. We have her dancing, we have her on the stage when she's hypnotized, and then this tear is like the pagliaccio, the clown, the crying clown.
Yeah. And of course, we all know Fellini's love of the circus. He had said many times that if he wasn't a filmmaker, he would have been a circus. He would have run a circus. And, he loves that atmosphere, and it creeps into so many of his films in different ways. It creeps into the Nino Rota scores, which could be sort of circus tunes almost sometimes. And I think that, Giulietta Masina as the sad clown is just a classic Fellini creation. And she, that performance in this film, it floors me every time. I find it just beautiful and funny and devastating. And I think that she had this ability to touch people. And I love I don't know whether it's apocryphal or not, but the story of her being robbed in Rome when some kids shoved her and grabbed her bag and then returned it later with a note saying, "Ci scusi, Gelsomina," we're sorry, Gelsomina, using her name from La Strada. I remember when I was living in Rome, I used to co-host sometimes the Rai Radio 3 show, Hollywood Party. And we had for the opening of Central Station, we had Walter Salles and Fernanda Montenegro on. And Central Station is in so many ways a kind of homage to Cabiria. There's so many parallels in the film, but nowhere more so than the Fernanda Montenegro character. And, I said during the show while we were recording in the studio to Fernanda Montenegro, I'm sure I'm not the first. I know I'm not the first person to make the comparison with Giulietta Masina, but were you thinking about that? Were you aware of that? And she burst into tears and was so emotional and talked about, the honor of being compared in any way to Giulietta Masina, who was just like a god to her in terms of acting. And that was very moving. It was really lovely. I have to say, the years that I was in Rome, I 89 was sort of, I did not really, I started working for Variety in 91 when I was in Rome. I became the Rome bureau chief. And I did see Fellini around at various things. I saw him. I remember seeing him once at a reception at Campidoglio at the Capitol for Martin Scorsese. And we were leaving and he was coming up the stairs with the red scarf flying and his usual, and the hat. And he said, già cominciato, has it already started? And we said, well, it's finished. And he just muttered something about, I'll go and get a drink anyway. So he went into the tail end of the reception. But, I did see him around town. I loved to walk in along Via Marghera, the street he and Massina lived in. And I did see them every now and then, either together or separately. Mostly separately. And I think the marriage was what it was there. He was famous for his philandering. And
they'd come to a kind of arrangement at a certain point.
But I did see her. I remember seeing her once in the Feltrinelli bookshop on Via del Beltrino, just around the corner from Via Marghera. And I really wanted to talk to her, but I was shyer than I am now. And also just thought, no, she must be so used to this and being bothered all the time. So I left her alone. I also thought, I probably won't be able to talk to her without just bursting into tears.
And when you think of those two performances as well, they're 1 year apart.
Yeah, and interestingly, they both those films, the Fellini-Masina combination, both won the Oscar for what was then called the Foreign Language Oscar in 57 and 58, and Masina, of course, won Best Actress at Cannes for the film for Cabiria. It's great stuff. It's so good.
And I mean, Fellini, the inception, the concept of the character comes originally from The White Sheikh. It appears briefly as a sort of small part of The White Sheikh, and of course, the White Sheikh I think is a really interesting film because it has so many little keys to what Fellini's sort of going to go on and develop, a little bit like Cabiria does. But for I always think of the sanctuary moment as very similar to what he expands in La Dolce Vita with the sort of miracle of the child. By saying that, I don't mean in any way to sort of diminish what is in Cabiria, because I don't think I think there's a certain bagginess to La Dolce Vita, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but which is the better film is very much depends on what mood you're in.
I think one of the key things is that the success of La Strada and Cabiria, particularly outside of Italy, I think was instrumental in getting him bigger budgets, and it allowed him to paint on a wider canvas, and certainly to develop his sense of who he was as a filmmaker, to pull away from the neorealists and to kind of find the fantastical Fellini that sort of emerged to greater degrees as he went on. But there is a real difference in those films. But I think if you look at Cabiria particularly, there are 2 or 3 key sequences that I think are classic Fellini motifs that would be repeated in some way. And I don't mean repeated in a sense of an artist repeating himself or being repetitious, but I mean developed in other ways. And obviously Cabiria, being a minor character in The White Sheikh, is one, but also, the sanctuary scene is the blue plate, the template for blueprint. Sorry, for scenes that would happen in later films, but also the scene with the magician, the variety show, is such a great Fellini scene and so cruel that she is there in this audience full of rowdy men. She is hypnotized, and while she's hypnotized on stage, she completely regresses back to the 18-year-old girl with the long dark hair, going to mass every Sunday with her mother. She's still called Maria at that stage, which is, could not get a holier name. And she reveals the yearning for romance, for security, love, comfort, all those things that she doesn't have. And she is loath to reveal those when she is out and about and being herself. She's sort of constantly saying, I don't need anything. I have my own house. I have the utilities. I have everything I want. She refuses to have a pimp when Amleto suggests, why don't you come work with me? I'll take care of you. She's like, no, I don't need anything. And yet she's just been cruelly ripped off and thrown in the river to drown. So, I love that scene in the variety show with the magician, and an incredible actor. I don't remember his name. Aldo Silvani is his name. But that face is such a Fellini-esque face, kind of grotesque. And there's a moment when he goes through with the hypnosis with her. He gets her to the point of revealing herself and what she really wants. And you see this look come over the magician's face, this look of conscience, where he thinks, oh, this needs to stop. This woman is clearly revealing something very deep and painful and real. And that moment of compassion, I think, is very Fellini. But, there are the other scene that I think is quintessential Fellini, and that was, again, the template for scenes that would develop later on, particularly with Mastroianni in 8½, is the meeting with Amedeo Nazzari's character, the movie star. He's had a fight outside the Kit Kat Club of the Venice Swanky Club. And he's had a fight with his fabulous girlfriend, Jessie, played by... I'm obsessed with this actress, with her pseudonym being Dorian Gray.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that's so good.
I mean,
and she sort of looks like Veronica Lake or sort of Jessica Rabbit. She's sort of
she's kind of somewhere between those and Anita Ekberg in La Dolce Vita. But she's this stormy, tempestuous type who comes out and smacks him in the face and says, you're a ham, and this relationship is terrible, and I'm constantly humiliated and whatever. While other women are checking out other women, and that stormy sequence that leads to him picking up Cabiria and almost indifferently get in the car, and she goes with him to the Piccadilly Club, then to his amazing house, this incredible villa, which is such luxury, such opulence that she's never seen. And I love that there are a couple of moments in that I love, not just the interaction with him, where you see this, you see Massina's face just change from absolute awe and disbelief. First of all, somewhat suspicious. Then she's kind of just thrilled to be there. Then suddenly the tears come and she's like, no one's ever going to believe me. And then she ends up locked in the bathroom when Jessie comes back for the evening. And but the two moments I love are when she's entering this house and she's just kind of bewildered by the scale of it all. And there's a shot of teeny tiny Giulietta Masina going up this massive staircase, and she's like encountering the third or fourth dog, and she's in very, very Roman. It's an altro cane, another dog. It's just a great moment, and she looks just so tiny and out of place, like an alien here. And then I also love the very cruel smack back to reality as she's leaving in the morning. She's sneaking out while Jessie is still asleep after she spent the entire night locked in the bathroom. And she smacks into the glass door. It's just a great moment of physical comedy, but also a slap back to cruel reality as she picks up her shabby little umbrella and waddles out of there. I mean, it's a great scene. But I think that moment with the Amedeo Nazzari character is also just prime Fellini, that would come back in La Dolce Vita and 8½. Those were the real motifs that I think he kept returning to. But I have a question for you.
Sure.
You're probably more versed in classic Italian cinema than I am, but the name Cabiria, of course, borrowed from the 1914 silent epic,
Yes.
considered to be the birth of the epic film. where Cabiria was a little girl separated from her parents during an eruption of Mount Etna, and then later abducted by pirates. I mean, do you think there's a connection there, a reason she was called Cabiria, an homage to that film?
Oh yeah, I think it's I think that there are clues to why, because she's chosen that name as her name, sort of street name. And
Nome d'arte.
Exactly, nome d'arte. And when she talks to the other sex workers and she's reporting about her new boyfriend, the respectable man, the accountant, who's taken her to the cinema, and she's saying, "Oh, it was a first showing. It was a prima visione. So it was because there are these different cinemas in these periods where you have the grindhouses that are very cheap, and then you have expensive cinemas which show the first the premieres of the big films that are coming
and obviously
out.
she had been to movies, because she at the movie stars house, when the dinner comes up, she picks up this lobster and says, "What's this?"
I've seen it
one
somewhere.
in a movie.
So
she's obviously seen movies, but not prima visione, as you say. And I love that the prima visione is some gladiatorial film.
Yeah, exactly. And she's also seen a film with the guy in with Vittorio Gassman, and he says, "I wasn't in that film. That's somebody else."
Yes,
It's
that's a great moment.
It's a typical sort of, "Oh, I loved you in whatever," and it's not. So she says, and then she says to the other prostitutes as a sort of like to show how sophisticated this boyfriend is, and he told me that it didn't happen, that they just made it up for the cinema. And it's like, it was like a revelation to her, that this was just a made-up story. It wasn't like
she thought film was documentary. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so I think that she identifies with Cabiria as this separated child and this orphan-like character. And she's not seen it as a film. She's seen it as a real story, a true story, and she identifies with her in that way. And it's part of her armor of self-protection. And what is so distressing about the end, because the end had this sort of prologue to the end, if you like, this run-up where she's got in this relationship with the accountant, and he seems to be a nice guy, and
he's almost a saint. I mean, clearly we should all be aware, even without ever seeing the film before, that he is too good to be true. But
right.
He's such a saint, and their dates are so courteous, and he's so sweet with her and kind, and giving her chocolates and taking her to movies and things, and he always turns up with something for her, with flowers. I mean, I love the meeting at Stazione Termini.
Yes.
When the first date, when he turns up with flowers and she's still suspicious of him. And I mean, I particularly love that scene because, I moved to Rome in 89. I first went there in 84, and then I started going there pretty regularly during the late 80s. And Stazione Termini, which, Termini station, the main train station in the center of Rome, has been, it's had a revamp since then. But in the 80s, it looked exactly like that, packed with people, watching your pockets all the time because it was rife with pickpockets. And just packed with people, and it still looked like this hub of kind of like almost Grapes of Wrath poverty, of people kind of just going off to wherever they were going in Italy. And it was so crowded, and the shops all looked the same, the storefronts, everything about it looked the same. I found that very moving to see that. When I watched it again the other night to prepare for this, I had forgotten how much of that Rome remained intact when I was living there in the 80s and into the early 90s.
Absolutely. And when she's talking to the other girls about him, she's not saying, "Oh, he's wonderful, he loves me, finally I'll get out of here." They're saying, and he doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to, they've got their logic, which is entirely based on the streets. And she's like, "No, I don't understand it. I don't see what's going on." So it takes ages for her to actually say, "You know what? This is my chance at happiness. This is a proper relationship." It's not like she does, it takes ages for her to take off that armor, so that when she's finally got it off and she's finally betrayed, it's all the more, it's all the more distressing because she did it. There's no way she walks into this in a foolish way, or she's been gaslit in modern.
Yeah, it's taken a lot to get her there, but I mean, by the time she is there, she is this completely raw, unprotected soul. She is absolutely the most vulnerable creature, and I find the scenes where he takes her to the restaurant, where he takes her before the long walk through the woods, where you have this sort of sinking feeling, oh God, this is going to go very badly. And, gets her to the edge of a cliff. And you see his face, even in the restaurant scene, start to transform. You see his nervousness as he tells her to put the great wad of money. It's like, it's 700,000 lira or something, which was a lot back then for someone of that income bracket, especially. And you just see that come out, and you start to feel this sense of dread in the pit of your stomach that grows and grows and grows. And it's heartbreaking that it takes her so long to see it. But, I love that entire sequence. It rips your heart out. And I'm assuming, I think that was filmed at Castel Gandolfi, which used to be the papal summer residence. And it's a beautiful part of Rome. And
there's just this amazing light on the lake as well. And I think he actually comments on it. He says something like, "Oh, what a strange light, what a strange atmosphere."
I think he says something about it's magical.
That's right. Yeah,
well. They go there for the sunset, I think. But it's it is a terrible and beautiful part of the movie. It's really, really quite something.
Yeah, and to just go back briefly to the sequence in the house that you talked, I love the fact you brought up those 2 points, because those are exactly the points that when I was rewatching it, I laughed my head off at the pratfall of the glass door. As cruel as the point is, it's also her sense of
physical comedy is so great.
It's amazing. It's absolutely peerless, and the fact that she
could have been a silent film actor.
Without a doubt, she could have been a Keaton. She could have been a Chaplin, and yet at the same time, she never breaks character. It's all completely in character. Even that dance she does could easily be a bit, but it isn't. Yeah. It's exactly what that character would dance like. And I love the way she has this. And I'm not sure if this is a difference in Italy and American or English or English language culture, but I know a lot of Italians who do this thing of giving a constant. My wife is definitely one of these people who gives a constant commentary on what they're doing. Of like, oh, and I'll put the thing over there, and this is this, and oh, what have we got here? And this is, and it's just like, and she does that when she's a sort of like, he's saying, oh, let's have some food. She's like, oh, a little olive is over here, and I've got some chicken. I don't know what this is, and it's just like this, you create a verbal atmosphere around you, a director's commentary of your own film, and it's hilarious. Just so reactive to the world,
My favorite moment like that is also when she sees the car, the Fiat, that Amleto and his beautiful blonde sex worker girlfriend, I guess, are sitting and she's suddenly, certo la Fiat è sempre la Fiat. Fiat is always Fiat, as if it's the grandest, most luxurious automobile in the world, even though it's this tiny matchbox. But she just has this way, as you say, of commenting about everything, of narrating her own life, which I think makes her, even more vulnerable. But, I love also how that she is jaded. She is protective. She has put up these walls, this shell around herself. But at the same time, she is still oblivious to the evils of the world around her and the extreme vulnerability that she is in this line of work and in this environment. I love the moment where she's still in disbelief about Giorgio, the cad at the beginning of the film, who shoves her in the river and runs off with her bag, and says, "What would he really try? Would someone really try to kill you for 40,000 lira?" And Wanda, the wise and worldly Wanda, just sort of shrugs and says, "They'd kill you for 5,000 lira," which is about $2 American.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it when they save her as well, and they're sort of like, they save her in the most unseemly. Talk about physical comedy, like shaking her upside down. She's dead. Legs. No, she's dead. Oh no! Does a corpse vomit water? No, he's still alive. Look, her eyes are open, and she immediately sort of bounces up and starts kicking them and saying, "I want to go home. Get off me! I'm going home. Who are you?"
so ungrateful for them saving a life.
Where are my shoes?
There's some very beautiful Roman moments there, like there's a young couple and he's very interested in running in to see what's going on, and the woman standing back says, "No, paura," she's afraid to see. Like it's this superstition about seeing the dead is very Italian. I felt like there's a lot of Pasolini in those moments too. Kids. There's a moment one of the kids says, "Ma mi sa che è morta." And it's this, I think she's dead, but said with such a deadpan kind of like, it's not the first time this little kid has seen death or experienced it. It's a tough environment. I also just love those shots. There's something very, very beautiful about those shots where Cabiria and Wanda might be in the foreground discussing and the kids are sort of scrambling up this very skeletal scaffolding in the background. I don't know what it is. I'm assuming it's some kind of construction that looks like it's been abandoned at a certain point. And, I remember that is classic Italy too, constructions that get abandoned midway because the money runs out or whatever. And so you're constantly all over the country seeing these shells of buildings that are not quite finished.
The party of cement is always in power, as they say. Yeah.
But those kids, those kids around that, I mean, it's not a very Italian reference, but they look like those beautiful Ruth Orkin photographs of kids, jumping in and out of rivers and things in around New York. It's beautiful, and I think those moments too, the black and white of the film is just so gorgeous. It's just sears into your eyes the whole time. These beautiful indelible images.
I think it's so layered as well, because you've got the foreground and the background and things going on, and as a whole, people are talking at different levels, but you've also got like the train passing in the background that's making a noise, and I think there's a sound of an airplane going overhead, and there's work noises going on. So there's just a sense of like this place is a sort of no man's land in the middle of all this modernity, which is, things are going on around, and she's stuck in the middle of this little bunker in the middle of nowhere.
It's really hard to believe that it is basically the same city as Via Veneto, all these posh nightclubs and restaurants and people eating out in cafe style outside the restaurants on the wide sidewalk of this beautiful grand via and Viale. And I think that, it is inconceivable almost that level of poverty exists in not quite a stone's throw, but certainly in the same geographical radius. And everything is so vividly drawn. I think that, now we talk all the time about income, wealth disparity. And I think he was showing that in such an incredibly vivid way back then. It was, almost revolutionary, because most of the neorealism films, if not all, most of them were really just showing the poverty. We didn't see much of the wealth, the juxtaposition of the wealth. And I think Fellini shows that very beautifully. But, all of those scenes. I'm sort of amazed. I wonder now, if the film were made under the same circumstances, if Pasolini would have just been credited as a co-screenwriter, because everything you read about him and interviews with him, he talks about having written much of the dialogue then, because Fellini, of course, was from Emilia-Romagna, and Rimini, Flaiano and Pinelli were more gentlemanly types, and Pasolini was right in there with the shadiest aspects of Rome, with the dodgiest of characters. And so he knew that speech, he knew that dialect, and so he was writing that dialogue, helping to develop those characters. And I think all of those scenes around Cabiria's home with those other people living in poverty, and the scenes with the pimps and the women at Caracalla are very much Pasolinian, in a sense that you can see the links with Mama Roma and films. And I was surprised to know that the extent to which he worked on the film, and yet he gets a credit buried way, way deep in the end credits of, collaborazione alla sceneggiatura, collaboration on the screenplay. But I guess, by that time, Fellini and Flaiano and Pinelli were already becoming a powerhouse as artistic collaborators, so they were the forerunners. And it's worth noting also that this was a film that, as we said, risky for its time, audacious to depict that kind of milieu in a way that hadn't been really depicted so much. But, it was Dino De Laurentiis, a major producer who would go on to do all kinds of stuff at every level, from absolute, commercial blockbusters to to tiny Italian films. I think it's interesting to see that that he produced this film and that Fellini wasn't given more kickback, other than the censorship of the caves early on.
Yeah, I wonder. I was thinking about that when his name came up on the screen of where to put Dino De Laurentiis. He's sort of like a unique Italian figure because he's not really, maybe a Sam Spiegel or someone, but he's there's a bit of Roger Corman in him, and there's a bit of both the Roger Corman who did American International Pictures and the one who imported Bergman films into drive-ins. There's this
absolutely.
mixture of sort of genre film and Flash Gordon, and yet also he produces David Lynch films and gets him financing when nobody would touch him after Dune. He's got a real influence, I think. I mean, I know there was a documentary, I think his daughter has been instrumental in sort of burnishing his reputation, but
Right.
this early part of his career, I think, hasn't been as credited as I think he should be.
I mean, he was certainly an interesting character and very different from the very gentlemanly kind of Italian producer that was the norm, like Franco Cristaldi. But De Laurentiis was, the little that I knew of him in terms of encounters, where it was, very much a raconteur, very lively, and tons of stories and would pour out of him. And we forget that he did. How many producers do a film like Nights of Cabiria and then end up doing a King Kong remake that almost killed Jessica Lange's career? Did he not do the very, very poorly received Silence of the Lambs sequel, Hannibal? I think that was
or did he do Red Dragon? He definitely did one of those.
Yeah, I hope I'm not misremembering, but I think I definitely remember going to a press conference in the Uffizi, beautiful, Italian setting of the Florence Museum.
That will have been Hannibal then, because they filmed there as well.
And I'm pretty sure that was Dino. That was, he had a little one-on-one. I can't remember if that was for the radio show or for Variety, where I was writing at the time. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that was him, unless my memory is playing tricks on me. I mean, it's confusing because there was Luigi De Laurentiis and there's Aurelio, and there was a daughter who ended up producing as well. So there were a lot of De Laurentiis around.
Yeah. I mean, where do you think? I mean, I with this film, I feel that Felini does go off and do really interesting things, and I'm a big fan of Amarcord. I'm a big fan of 8.5 and La Dolce Vita.
Amarcord is my favorite of the post. Of the Fellini films where he really became Fellini, and I think that's probably not it's probably not a controversial opinion. I think it's the favorite of a lot of people.
Yeah, it's sort of got loads of Vitelloni in it, hasn't it? The guy with a motorbike who just drives through the village at high speed all the time, shouting news occasionally.
Yeah, I love the full circle sense of that, from his origins in Rimini, where he started as a cartoonist and caricaturist, sketching people on the beach, vacationers on the beach at Rimini, and then, he was doing for the movie theaters there. It was, before there was great poster art and marketing materials available. So he was doing sketches of the movie stars that would sit in the, where the lobby cards would be in the movie theaters in Rimini. All those fascinating early elements of his career, where he sort of learned how to observe people and draw people. And, you could say that his characters always had that caricature look about them. And that started there. And I do love the full circle aspect of going from Vitelloni and the early films back there to Amarcord. There's something very moving about that film and all its exuberance and everything. It's just him going back to his origins. Whereas Rome, his second home was a city that I think he always observed somewhat as an outsider. I don't think he was certainly never as Roman as Pasolini was, who was just entrenched in him in every way. Whereas Fellini was observing in his wily kind of circus master way.
Yeah, more a student of Rome than a sort of inhabitant, really. Yeah. Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you about Nights of Cabiria. Is there any other, maybe a recommendation you could give our listeners for an Italian film that they might not know just any random sort of maybe even something you've seen quite recently? Because I always feel that we look at these golden ages of Italian movies, and rightly so. And it's nice to sort of point people towards something maybe a bit more recent that has been done.
I don't know about a bit more recent. I will say the breakup from that Italian partner was so unpleasant. I mean, we're friends again now. Weirdly, like 25 years later, we're actually friends again at long distance. But back then, it was unpleasant, and it was my sort of ushering into the millennium where the millennium, it was 2000 when it happened, and I was so over it by the time I left Italy after 13 years in Rome that I had this almost physical rejection of Italian film. I had reviewed so much Italian cinema. I'd written about it extensively. So I kind of had a rejection of it. And now when I'm at film festivals like Venice or Cannes and there are new Italian films, I tend to be very sparing about the ones I agree to take on. And no film drove me insane with annoyance to the degree this year of Nanni Moretti's film, which was in Cannes, A Brighter Tomorrow. I mean, it was so self-indulgent, navel-gazing in a way that Moretti has always been to some extent, but he has been in more insightful, amusing ways. This way was just pure self-indulgent about being Nanni Moretti, being the most fantastic, interesting thing you could have. And it was actually dull as fuck. But and just annoying and glib and facetious in all kinds of ways. But so I don't know about recent films. I mean, I really thought that the Paolo Sorrentino's film La Mano di Dio, Hand of God, was underrated. And I think that's a very, Sorrentino has always been accused of lifting from Felini. Nowhere more so than The Great Beauty. And this film does so as well. But I thought there was a real sincerity to it and a sense of the personal that's not often there in Sorrentino's films. It's easy to see, it's on Netflix anywhere in the world. So it's so easy to see. And I think I also like that film a lot because it's the 80s. I was in Italy for the tail end of the 80s, and, the whole excitement built around Maradona joining the Napoli football team is so Italian. And, I think there's some fantastic stuff in that film. In terms of older films, I love all of the De Sica comedies with Sophia Loren and Marcello Mastroianni, and De Sica as an actor as well. But one favorite of mine, a Commedia all'Italiana, which I think never gets the love that it should, is Risate di Gioia, Monicelli's film. I think in English it's called, it literally would translate as Laughter of Joy, and Joy is the name of the character. But I think it has another title. I can't remember what it was, but a Monicelli film with Anna Magnani in a comedy role. And, Anna Magnani we think of as dramatic fireworks, but she is priceless in comedy. She is so great. And she's playing an extra at Cinecittà. She makes her living appearing in crowd scenes at Cinecittà in biblical epics and things. So that in itself I thought was fantastic and hilarious. And she is swindled and ends up in prison. She has this disastrous New Year's Eve where she's out with Ben Gazzara, who of course we know from his American films, but one of his rare Italian films. Very, very funny, and so much great stuff about the church in that. I mean, it revolves around sacred necklaces that are stolen off a Madonna statue in a church. And it is a great film. I find it hilarious, and Magnani's performance in it is one of my favorites. So I would say that is a film. Everybody knows Big Deal on Madonna Street and the classic Monicelli comedies, but Risate di Gioia is one of my favorites.
Absolutely, I've not seen that. I'm gonna put that in my watch list straight away. I just recently watched Boccaccio 70, and that's Fellini, Monicelli, De Sica, and Visconti. So
those portmanteau films are incredible.
Yeah,
they're very uneven. Some are better than others, and some episodes are better than others. But occasionally you will get one that's a complete gem. There's one, I can't remember what it's called, and I can't even remember who directed the segment, but it's basically a taxi ride in which Anna Magnani has an argument with the cab driver about whether her dog, which she's taking in the taxi, is a lap dog or not a lap dog, because a lap dog gets in for free, and the taxi driver maintains that it's bigger than a lap dog, so she has to pay extra. And she gets into this incredibly Magnani-esque screaming match with the cab driver, and it's just the most hilarious like 10 minutes or whatever it is, 15 minutes. It's such a great piece. And it's Magnani in Rome just firing on all cylinders.
What more do we need?
And apparently, this was a little footnote I read somewhere that Cabiria, I think Cabiria, that originally, he says it was written for Massina, but there's somewhere I read that Magnani was at some point considered for this film, that she read. I don't know whether this is true or not. I read it somewhere. It wasn't particularly well sourced, but somebody had said Magnani apparently read the script, read the scene with Amedeo Nazari, and said, "Really, Federico, do you think I would let some asshole lock me in a bathroom for an entire night?" And she wasn't interested. But I don't know. I like to think that it was written for Massina and nobody else, because certainly nobody else could have played it that way. And it's the reason we still love that film today.
Exactly. I got a feeling Massina would make any script into a Massina film ultimately, because just of she's an actress who feels like she's writing it herself. I mean, not by in any sense of artificiality, but it feels like she is. You should credit her as well with a major part of the creative process.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, it's interesting that Fellini talks about. He had talked in interviews about how free his scripts were and how the characters are never really set in stone until he starts shooting and starts getting the actors in there. So I assumed that meant improvisation, but apparently not. Apparently it was all like going back and working with the writers again and tweaking characters, because when Massina is asked the same question, whether there's improvisation in Gelso or Cabiria, she is very deferential and says no, it all comes from Federico. She's always deferential to him, being this sort of 360-degree artist, and all of the vision is his, even though a lot of the comedy obviously comes from her.
I was interviewing George Stevens Jr. about the AFI recently, and he told me that Felini came to talk to them as a guest sort of speaker, and that inaugural class in 1969, they were all very much into the idea of the 60s and freedom and improvisation, and they saw Felini as one of their own. This is a guy who just throws a circus up and films it, and it's amazing. Right. And so they asked him this question: how much is improvisation important to your process? And he went, not at all. I have prepared everything. Everything is written, everything is worked out in advance. And then if something happens, that's great. But I'm not, it's time is too expensive for me to be trying to work it out as I'm, and it was fun because George Stevens Jr. from his father comes from the old school. And so he was saying it was we won that argument. Yes, you need to learn how to make a film. You can't just turn up with a camera.
Discipline, budget, stick to it, stick to the plan, all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, David, it's an absolute joy talking to you. And
same for me, John. I really, really had a nice time. Thank you.
Brilliant. Take care, man.
See you in Venice.
Arrivederci ragazzi, ci vediamo in un prossimo film.
Lo speriamo.